Testing. Good test. Let me have attention, please. It's just a few minutes until time to begin, but I wanted to tell you about something I'm going to pass around. This is the map that I was going to show you, but Pat Fielding had stolen it, put her name on it. So anyway, she said she bought it at a hotel. But this would be very nice to look at. Let's start it up this row over here and then pass it and take it row by row or something. And remember, when you look at this, you will see the word Jerusalem in red. Don't be confused by that. It's the little dot that shows where it is located. And when you look at that, you will also notice that it's on the downside of the mountain range. In other words, just going down, and then Mount of Olives is higher. So all of that's rather interesting as you look at it, and kind of hold it like that and see the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, etc., as you look at it. So, my friend, you are first. And thank you, Pat. Oh, Pat wants it back too, because I don't have one to give her to make up for it. Someday we'll find it, Paulette. Yeah, look at that one. Well, I know, but let me get my magnifier. If I didn't know where these places were, I wouldn't believe you. That's how Bible bindings get broken. People putting things in, oh, you got it in the case. This one is my water. This one. Ah, listen to that. See each of you this evening. Appreciate your presence, and got a few more seats. If folks come in, tell them there's several rows here that have some places on them, and that will be good. And 4 seats down here, 3 over here, etc. So let's begin our class now with prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the blessings you give us. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your Son who came and lived on this earth. And we're thankful that we have had some experience in being at these places where the patriarchs and the prophets and the judges and the Son of God came and lived among men. Pray you'd guide us in our study. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, this evening we want to continue with the things that we were talking about last time, and I'm going to move after this into the study of the animals, some of the animals of the Bible, especially the significant ones that they used in their daily activities and so on. And so this picture was made at Nazareth Village, and who are these ladies? They're at the well, and whether that's a well or a cistern, I don't really know, but you will also notice sometimes here, and these things are, whether this was really like this or they've made it this way, I imagine that's the case really. And so what you will observe is that there'll look like there are little places here where ropes have come, and I've seen old wells where this is really the case. They're just almost worn out because they took a stone, chiseled out the center of it to put on top of a well. And then that ropes coming up and down just simply wear it out, because maybe it's soft material at it anyway. I wanted to show you this at Tel Hebron. Hebron, we call it Hebron mostly, but it's pronounced Hebron there. Among the Arabs, it's Tel Rumida. So Tel Hebron, we will call it that because that's the name in the Bible. Abraham was there in his time, and it was there that he bought the cave of Machpelah. The cave of Machpelah, you remember, from some of the local people. You see, he had come into the country. He had no land. God said, go to the place that I will show you, and I will tell you then what I'm going to do. And he said, I will give this to you and to your seed after you. He specified all the way from the river Euphrates to the river of Egypt, which was the Wadi El Arish at the southern part of the country. And that's rather significant. There is this house that was there that has been excavated. And what you are looking at here, I'll give you just some idea of some of these things. That this is a, let me go right here. Is that it? These columns are part of what was called a four-room house. Now don't worry about that. I'll explain four-room houses later and show you some pictures, four-room houses, and some diagrams that will make it a little more sensible to you as to why they are called that. But Israel began to build that kind of house. There has been one found in the land of Goshen. Maybe it belonged to Israelites. And then when they went into the land, gradually, they first, when they could, they lived in other people's property. They ate the orchards from there, the vineyards from there, and so on. But eventually they had to do things on their own. And so that's what happened. Now, the building that you see around this, that is the concrete that you see, and looks like little lights up there. I think they're just posters or something. And that is part of an apartment building that's built on top of this. This happens a lot. So an excavation takes place, and then building takes place over that. And the reason is, in so many places, Jerusalem, it's especially true like that, is because space is limited. So that is what has happened here at this place. I was here in 2017, I think that's the right year, and I believe in 2019, David Padfield went, and they had done this. They had painted this inside to let you see what was going on in this little area. So, several things are going on. There is another picture that shows somebody with sheaves over his shoulder, bringing in the sheaves. And you will see some of that right here, if I can get the right one, right there. See that? See, he has the grain there, that's grain. And then you see here the grapes, and somebody's bringing in the grapes. And the pressing floor for the grapes, where they're crushed by the feet of the people, is right there. And then in the foreground here, this picture is rather interesting. This is the barn, right down here. Got the barn? I'll get the barn in a minute. You see? Now what would we call that? We'd call it a pit or a silo, wouldn't we? So you'd have a large area. It's not very big. It's about like this. This is just probably for this one house. But if we should go to a place like Megiddo, where they had horses, and it was a place where both Solomon and Ahab kept their horses for their military exploits, you would find a much larger place. And so I have, in a moment or two, I have another picture that will show you what that would look like. So this is just painted by an artist to let you see what was going on at that particular place. I showed you this or talked about it last week, and that was at Samaria. This is a wheat field that has been cut, most likely cutting with an instrument like this, you see, to cut it down. And you can see them using a hand, what's that called? Sickle. Yeah, hand sickle. Or sometimes you will find them with the long pole and the one like this. And so they're doing it this way. So that probably is more efficient in a large operation. And that hill on the left over there is the hill of Samaria. It's called that in the Bible. So that's where the northern capital of Israel was located. And you would find maybe small grain fields even on the top of that. But here's a large one. Now, let's take a closer look at these sheaves that are here. What has happened to them? They've been bound, haven't they? And if you would look carefully, I saw some illustrations, I thought, of some string. You can see where they've been kind of pulled around, like maybe right there. Is that a string? It looks like it might be. So in places like that where they've bound them, you see, to make it easy to carry them and move them. And of course, I guess if we said, let's name one Bible woman who worked in the fields like that, who was that? It was Ruth. And so it illustrates exactly what we read in the scripture. Okay, so here is a silo now at Megiddo. So this one is very large. This one is not quite maybe as deep as this room, but it's almost. It would be 3/4 that size. And it's very large. It'd be more like this going around. And there would be sometimes steps in them. I do not see steps in this one, but there would be steps in them so that you could go down to the bottom as you began to use up all of the supplies that were there. So they'd bring this in from all around in the area and put it here and then use it for the horses and other animals that might be in that particular city, because it was a fortress city. Looking further, this is back at the 4-room house at Hebron, and this is a different picture without any of the painting, and so that shows you that's just one for a small group or a family that would have their grain there. We have pantries. We put our commercial flour and everything, in there. Keep it there. We put it in bins, little bins. But this is what they did. And then every day, and I don't have those pictures with me, but you know what happens every day that they need it. They have to get out what they need, and then they have to start grinding it. And they have instruments, and I'll try to show you some instruments like that would illustrate that. Now this tell of Hebron is up on the hill. Look down in the valley and you will see where these wealthy people lived, where the Machpelah folks lived. And so that is the building that covers the cave of Machpelah. Do you see what I'm talking about? Right there. Now the building wasn't there, right? And if you go to the building today, Pat, what do you see? You didn't see that. I told you there's a difference in tours. I'm joking. Well, you've been with me. Not there. Yeah, so she's been with Leon. Well, Leon's been there because I've been there with him. But what do you have in a situation like this building? This building covers the cave of Machpelah. And the cave of Machpelah is not seen by anybody except through a few holes, about like this, where you can look down, and perhaps they have let down a light that you'll be able to see down in there. But some years ago, any of you know the name Moshe Dayan? You remember the one-eyed guy? He lost one in the war with the Brits. The Turks, perhaps it was. One or the other. And so he was here one night, so the story goes. It's probably true. And there was a young girl, perhaps, I don't remember if it was his daughter, but she was very young and very thin. And she was let down into this place and came back and reported what she had seen, which was almost nothing. I mean, the burials that were there took place a long, long time ago. This cave of Machpelah was actually built by, who wants to name the character who built it? Not Machpelah. Think of a New Testament character who built it. Who said that? Herod. Which Herod? The Great. Okay, there are a lot of them. Herod the Great built this. And why did he build this building there? Because it was believed at that time that who was buried here? Abraham and his wives and family and so on were there. So you have tombs that are shown up on the surface that you can go in and look at, but you have to go down to find the tombs, and who knows whether there's anything left after all of these years. So that's the cave of Machpelah, and that's where Abraham went and made all this negotiation. And that's a wonderful example of trading in Bible times. You know, he said, well, you know, how much? I mean, he's a stranger. And they say, well, you know, what's a little money among friends? Right? That's the Middle Eastern way of getting the best deal for themselves. Well, what's this among friends? It's divided into two parts, and the Muslims have the larger part. That's why it's like it is. And the Muslims go in on the right end here. The Jews go in over on the other end. So that's what goes on.
So that was built by Herod? What we're seeing there? Is that
Yes. And these are Herodian stones that you see, just like you'll see in the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So he built both places. And that's rather significant, isn't it? That was his understanding. And I mean, of his time, that was what they understood about that it was that way. Near the home of Abraham, which was said to be at Mamre, just a little on the outskirts of the town, there were said to be and also an oak there. And in this picture, this is a slide that I made way back, maybe my first or second trip. And you'll see that there's a mosque in the distance there. See, so that's the predominant religion at that time, certainly, when it was there. And there is this oak of Mamre shown here, which is the large old oak. And is this the same one? It goes back nearly 4,000 years, 1,500, 3,500 years. I couldn't say. I wasn't there. So, anyway, maybe it was there. Now, when we closed, and I think we talked about this, but I want to introduce it again and get into it. In Deuteronomy 7 and verse 13, God told the people the kind of land that he would give them. And he said that it would be one where you would have grain new wine, and oil. All right, so we have grain, and that comes from primarily what two plants? Wheat and barley. Barley comes in first. About a month or 6 weeks later, wheat comes in. And we said that these feasts that they observed were built around the agriculture because they had to be there to work. And then between the times of various harvesting, they could go to Jerusalem for the feast days that were there. And the next thing they had was wine. This was for the drink that they would have, and for fruit that they would have from it. And then also they would have the oil, and that would be the olive oil. So those are three of the main crops or things that they would have. There are some other grains too, some cereal grains, others like a few other things, but we'll talk about that later. And he told them it would be a place where there would be wheat and barley, vines and fig trees and pomegranates. So that would be a wonderful dessert certain times of the year, and a land of olive oil and honey, which we've already talked about, the honey and what that would be. So do you remember the story in the 9th chapter of Judges? It tells us that Abimelech wanted to make himself the ruler of the people. And that was not God's plan at all. Of course, it's a division. The kingdom has divided, it's going to divide. It hasn't at this point. And so he makes himself to be the king. He's going to be king. And Jotham told a fable. And the fable was that all the trees of the forest went out to the olive tree and said to the olive tree, "Come be our king." What did the olive tree say? "I'm too busy making oil. I can't do that." And so he didn't want to do that. And then the fig tree, they went to the fig tree. Fig tree said, "I'm too busy making fig Newtons," right? And then after that, they went to the vine, and the vine said, "I'm too busy making grape juice and wine." And so as a result, they did not get a king like that. And so then they went to the what? The bramble bush, yeah. It was just a thistle. It was just nothing. And it said, "I'd be glad to serve if my party calls on me." And of course his party was calling. See? Isn't it funny how politics are much the same as they were then? But I'm not talking politics tonight. Now, the typical plants of Palestine are viticulture. That's the grapes, the vines. And it symbolized also the fruit of the land. So when spies were sent from the Sinai, from the Negev, up into the hill country, which was near Hebron, actually. And so when they did that, they came to the valley of Eshcol. And there they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two men. This little item that you see here, I probably should have brought this so you would see this. It's pretty good size. It's about this high. Maybe it's about this size, at least a foot long, almost 10 inches long. And that's made from olive wood. And that's what they use with the old olive stumps that happen to be around Bethlehem and that vicinity. They turn them into things that can be sold to the tourists. And it's I have seen one that's very large, but that I thought was a very nice one, and I wanted that as one of my souvenirs, which I've had it for a long time, and display it proudly. So that's what these men were doing. This also today serves as the symbol of guides, and so the guides will carry this. It'll be on their badges. It may be on the side of cars sometime if it's the National Parks Authority or something of that sort. And this is in the vicinity near Jordan. You just see a few oak trees that are there, and you will also see something else on that hillside. I mean, it's not doesn't look very good today, but what else do you see on the hillside? Terraces, right? See, so it's another place. There are just many places like that in the country where you find the terraces that are there. Let's see, here we go next. And also, often we see these towers in the field. They're mentioned several times in the scripture. This one is near Gibeon. And you can also see terraces there if you look carefully, that there's a different level of some of these where these plants are planted. There's different levels for them. So this is a good little picture showing, it goes back a long ways too. This is a field that looks like it's more rock than dirt. And of course the vines grow very well in that because they have to have a lot of moisture. And so there's a man, and he's doing exactly what we read in the Gospels, and we read it also in Isaiah 5. And that is, he is gathering the rocks, the larger rocks out of the field, and then he is building fences with them. Look at the rocks he's picked up. And then look, it's just solid rock, it looks like. And so it is not an easy job to get a vineyard ready to be used. But once it's ready, then of course they continue. And then sometimes they do what Jesus talked about. They let it out to others expecting a good return, because these men will take care of it. And just like you hire shepherds, you could hire vine keepers as well. And this is another one of the older pictures that is from that vicinity. I remember guides saying in those early years that this is probably the area of Eshcol. This is probably the area, because that's the way they knew it, as a place where it grew many vineyards, and it's altogether possible that that is the case. And you'll see the hillside, you'll see the terracing, and also, of course, the vineyards that are there. Okay. Now, how are the vineyards watered? How are they watered? And especially during the dry season, what's going to happen? Well, the Bible tells us what happened. Isaac blessed Jacob, and he said, now may God give you of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and an abundance of grain and new wine. So they're going to have this dew that is going to come on the place somehow. Esau was supposed to settle away from the dew of heaven from above. And where did he go? Which direction did Esau go? He went to the east, didn't he? To Edom. He went to Edom. Edom comes from Esau, the name does. So where is Edom? Anybody know? What country would we go to today to see Edom? Jordan. We'd go to Jordan. If we went directly across, we would be in what country? In Amman. We're in Jordan, yes. And in Bible times, we would have go south from there, and we would have Moab. Then we would have Edom as you continue to go south. And if you go to Jordan and you took the main road south, let's say from Amman, Jordan, the capital of the city, and you took the main road south, you would eventually, not too far down south of there, you would come on the east to an area where there's no vegetation. And so as you continue to go further south, it becomes more and more dry and so on. Anybody ever see Lawrence of Arabia? Didn't see Lawrence of Arabia? It's one of the best movies ever made. A lot better than that stuff they're doing today. Now, I put it one of the top movies that I've ever seen, and I haven't seen a lot of movies, but it's one of the top. Lawrence of Arabia. And if you take that and the gal I talked about the other day, Gertrude Bell, which somebody told me they'd seen that since then, the Queen of the Desert, but along the road that you travel through the desert going to Petra. And as you go along there and you look over on the left, the guide may say, that's where Lawrence's train, that's where the train blew up. That's where they had the, big episode here in the movie. And so that's rather significant, you see, that you've got so dry like that. So anyway, I wanted to emphasize that they are settling away from the dew of heaven. And that's rather important to us to realize. Moses said, so Israel dwells in security. The fountain of Jacob secluded in a land of grain and new wine. His heavens also drop down dew. There's an emphasis on that it drops down dew. Deuteronomy 33:28. Incidentally, several people have told me I wasn't able to be there, but I watched it on streaming. Did y'all know that you can see it? Please come to class. But if you have to be out, you can see it. If you've got a friend that says, I really wish I could be in that class, but the room was so full the first week. And so what are we going to do? Well, say stream it. Stream it. So we're talking about dew, though, right? And here we go. David mourned for Saul and Jonathan. He's on Mount Gilboa. And he says, let not dew or rain be on you, nor fields of offerings. So to say don't let the dew be on you is to put a curse on something. And that must have been something that would have happened temporarily at the time. I don't think it's something that's permanent there, certainly not today. It's a beautiful mountain. Elijah said, surely, when he talked about there'd be the famine, he said, surely there shall be neither dew nor rain these years. Not only no rain for the 3 years, but there would be no dew either for this period of time. 1 Kings 17. All right, now what? Look at this. The unity of brethren, according to Psalm 133, verse 3, is like the dew of Hermon coming down upon the mountains of Zion. Now, what are the mountains of Zion? Where is that? Out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. All right. So that's where it is. So here's Zion, and that's what the hill of Zion was, where the temple was built and so on. Jerusalem was there. And so the point is, according to the Net Bible notes, the Net Bible is really, the notes in it are really fabulous. And his point is that the same kind of heavy dew that replenishes Hermon may also be seen on Zion's hills. It's not that dew that comes down. And do you remember also, I don't know if I included that, but you've got the passage that the unity of brethren is like that. So it's like the dew that comes down from Hermon. And here are some vineyards today. And these vineyards are just below Lachish. This is a very nice picture of a vineyard that's, looks very prosperous today. These grapes are primarily for eating, not for wine. Or some places perhaps where they grow them for wine, or for eating the grapes when they're fresh. And how did they decide that we'll plant grapes around Lachish or Lachish? Well, they saw this that came from the Assyrian reliefs. Remember that when the Assyrians took the city, then the king went back, Sennacherib went back to his palace, and he said, I want pictures of this on the wall. And they made pictures. You can see it in the British Museum. You can go into the room where they have all of the pictures of him capturing Lachish, and also of the plants that were there. And so, do you see what I'm talking about? Do you see where the vineyard is located? See if we got it. See the vine? And what else do we have here? Let me see what else we've got. Should have, what's that? The palm, yes. And so they had palms and they had grapes, and he portrayed that. He had his artists to portray that. And then they could remember how they captured that city that was so valuable. See, it was a pleasure to work at Lachish. Because why? It was second to Jerusalem at the time. Where did he send word after he had captured Lachish? He sent word to Hezekiah in Jerusalem and said, we're coming after you next. So he went to Lebanon, to another place, and he went right on up to Jerusalem. But he failed there. Sennacherib was not successful. So all of that's really significant. Well, some grapes here, and of course you have different grapes, different places. And here's a gentleman who's trimming or pruning his vineyard. He prunes it that it may bear more fruit. When it's pruned, you see the large pieces that are cut off. This is true. This is viticulture. And in John 15 and verse 6, Jesus said, if any one does not remain in me, he is thrown out like a branch, and he dries up, and such branches are gathered up and thrown into the fire and are burned up. So Jesus used these illustrations from agriculture and also from daily life in his teaching. And this I also saw at Lachish, among those many vineyards I have. You'll see vineyards lots of places. They are all around Hebron and up and down the central mountain range there. And also you find a lot of them here. And so there's the pieces that have been cut off and pruned. They didn't bear any fruit. And then they burn them. And that's what you have left. And so that's the illustration Jesus used about the way that it would be with disciples that did not bear fruit. And these are grapes in the month of August in the vicinity of Lachish. And you just see them like this. They're just, wonderful looking and wonderful tasting too. It's okay to steal a grape because it's like what Jesus talked about, wasn't it? Going through the fields. You can do that and then eat that grain. So that's very nice. And look about the treading of the grapes. In Judges 9:27 it says that the Shechemites who lived at Shechem went out into the field and gathered the grapes of their vineyards and trod them and held a festival. Now that's where Abraham first settled. And there's a real big clue in that about that he was at Shechem. And later on, when Jacob comes with his family, he comes to Shechem also. It's the center of the land. It's the center, north and south. And so when you come to Shechem, what are you saying? It's going to be our land. We're going to take this place. God has given it to us. And so they held a festival there. In Jeremiah, it says that the Lord will roar from on high and utter his voice, and from his holy habitation. He will roar mightily against his foe. He will shout like those who tread the grapes against the inhabitants of the earth. So did the people have fun while they were working? Sounds like they did. I mean, you're shouting. I guess they did a little singing every now and then. And they wash their feet too, I hope. But it's like those of us who were raised in the country. We're more immune to things than a lot of people were, you know. And so I guess that was true. So now what do we have to do? We've got the grapes cut, but we want to make something more than fresh grapes because we can't eat all these grapes. And so we find a place where there's a nice rocky area. And remember what I told you about the 7 bags of rock that were left to the angels to spread over the earth? And they dropped how many on Israel? 6. Now this is not scripture. Don't mistake it. But here's one of the places. This is at Neot Kedumim. I told you about a place that you can go, and it would take you 2-3 days, 2 days at least, to see the place. And it'll take half a day to see one area of it. And in one area that you go, you can see the floor where you press the grapes. And so it is cut out of the rocks. And here it is right here. See that smooth area? And then what's this right here? That's the vat. That's a shadow in it. Makes it look like it's full, but it's nothing in there. So the shadow in it. So there are several of these here in this place. They have them at Nazareth Village in the natural rock that is there. And many other places in the country you will see these. Also, in addition to that, there are some that are larger and more professional. This is in the Negev. That's the south. Your versions in English had the south. You'll go to the south. And the word is Negev. N-E-G-E-V. They sometimes spell it N-E-G-E-B. Simply a desert place. It's not the wilderness of Judea, similar in the way that it looks. So you put the grapes in here, you trod them, have a lot of people getting in there. This is in the Byzantine period, and I would say this was more professional. In other words, it's commercial. They're going to sell this product. And I'm doing it, and I don't know why. I'm not touching any of it. Sorry about that. And so watch now and see what happens. It comes down into the vat there from the treading area now down into the vat. And this is the way the grapes are prepared. Okay, in Joshua chapter 9 and 10, you remember that these people meet the Israelites when they are coming from Jericho. They're coming across the Benjamin Plateau. Jerusalem was in Benjamin actually. And so from Jerusalem north is the tribe of Benjamin, and that area is a plateau, like a smooth, more or less flat area through the hill country. And so they come up through there, and so these people came to them. They set out as envoys, and they took worn out sacks on their donkeys and wineskins worn out and torn and mended. Yet they put them in animal skins. And so it says that these wineskins, they said, which were new, and behold, they are torn. Oh, we've had such a long journey. I mean, it's after all 12 miles, 10 miles down there. They said, oh, these were new when we started out. And so they convinced the Israelites, but of course God saved them in the battle that took place and all of that. Now, that happened. These people were from Gibeon. Now, there's 2 places you can easily be confused. Where was the capital that Saul set up for himself at first? Gibeah, correct. G-I-B-E-A-H, Gibeah. And it's just due north of Jerusalem. And then this one is more to the east. And being more to the east, You can see the town. This is made from Nebi Samuel, and there's a roof there that you can go up on and get this nice picture. And what's the first thing you notice at the tell? What's the first thing you notice? Terraces. They're just everywhere. Terraces. All of that had to be done by workers. And you'll notice another thing at this place. This end to the east doesn't have as much on the top. You don't see much. Over here you see houses. You see that? Now right down there near the road is where I saw the lady who made the broom and who swept up all the seed, getting back onto the grain, onto the threshing floor. And so what went on at this place? Did I show you this before? See, I showed these things to Paulette, and I think I've shown them to everybody. And I kept saying to myself, I know I showed that, because the Bible talks about people living under their own fig and under their own vine, and that's a symbol of plenty. Boy, I tell you, it's like, having things today that we wouldn't compare to that. And what did they have there at this place? They had a great pool at Gibeon. And when Abner was going to make himself to be the leader, and Joab, who was faithful to David, was standing up for David, and they took their men there, gathered all around this place on either side of it, and they said, let's go out and fight and see who wins. And so that is the pit where the great pool that they would be. That's Leon on the left and myself on the right. No, I'm the thinner one. I think I would be on the left. I read one time, that's a shadow. See, we're making a shadow when we're standing there. And I read one time about photography that you always want a little bit of yourself in the picture. It can be a little bit of your shadow, a little bit of your hand, a little bit of, just something to know you were there. And so they had steps going down into that, and that pool contained water. There is another tunnel here also that supplied water. Hope to talk about water systems sometime because they're very important. But here's what's more important right now. They had wine cellars there. They had 63 cellars, a space for 19,000 gallons of wine. That's quite a bit of wine, right? So for people that don't drink, that sounds like a lot. And they found in the work here, when they excavated, they found these jar handles with, guess what? The name of the town written on them. Just like, it's... When I was a kid, we had Dr. What was that, Double Cola? And we would call Huntsville. And what did that mean? When the other guy got down to where it said Huntsville, Alabama, where it was put together, then you got the rest of the drink. We drank after one another. So, isn't that neat? And that's the greatest thing you can find at a place that says this is Gibeon. We got to go. So, what did Hezekiah do? He built storehouses. Lachish was one of them. And when he built these storehouses, they put them in jars like this. Well, that didn't have the cracks in them. And they put on the handles, they stamped the handles, and these are called lamelech. L-M-L-K. Melech is the Hebrew word for king. L is to the king. So that's your taxes. And you took yours to Hebron, or you took yours to Lachish, or you took yours to wherever were these places. We better close. Thank you so much for being here tonight.